Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host today. Today I have James Rose. James is based out of Invermere and a local writer. Published 3 books this year. Congratulations. I guess it would be last year, but that's a tremendous accomplishment. And today we want to just focus in on 2 of your books. James, just tell me a little bit about who you are and how you ended up in the Columbia Valley, that kind of thing.
I was born in Cranbrook, and I grew up between Cranbrook and Invermere, and graduated from high school in Invermere, and then I went to university in Calgary and Vancouver, and eventually ended up back in Invermere once the pandemic hit. I was down in Colorado before that, and got busy writing novels.
Yeah. So you have a background in journalism and working with community newspapers, that kind of thing. Let's just talk a little bit about some of your writing experience before we get into your novels. What kind of things have you produced and written over the years?
Yeah, I started out writing freelance articles for magazines and community newspapers, a wide range of topics, community interest, sports, politics, anything really,
right.
as usually the case in the newspaper world, right?
Right. You have to be a bit adaptable.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so I've taken a look at both of your books, and they read really well, and it seems to me that you've taken some of your experience and injected it into those novels. Can you just give us an overview of the 3 books that you've published in 2020?
Sure, yeah. The first one that I put out was Chung Peace, and that's a story about a roving freelance journalist who lives in Aspen, Colorado, who's getting up to no good, and then that features the protagonist that's also in the 3rd book that I put out, which is Run for Roses. And then in between those 2 books is Buhoff, which is actually a book that has 3 novellas in it, and it's an anthology. Right.
So the 2 books are connected, so would you call them a sequel, or there's just a connection there?
Yeah, Run for Roses came out after, but it's a prequel to Chung Peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 2 work nicely together.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about Chung Peace. So you talk about a young journalist. Yeah. I have a feeling that a lot of James Rose is in the pages of that book, but it's sort of like a travel log to me. To some degree, it documents some of his experiences as he's sort of on a road trip and so forth. Was that sort of the approach that you wanted to take?
Yeah, it was sort of the idea of start with what you know and go elsewhere, right? And I felt like I could draw from my experiences of living in Colorado and traveling around that area to inform a story that's completely made up. And
how do you do that? How do you keep the factual from the fiction?
I just there's things that I feel are novelistic that I've experienced, try and work it into the plot. But I don't really think plot first. I think character first, and work out from there, and stumble upon a theme some way or another.
Yeah, your character development in the books are, you really relate to the characters. They seem very real and very human, and I thought that came across very strongly in your writing. Let's just talk about your style of writing for a minute. Like 3 books in 1 year, that's a career for some writers.
Yeah.
How do you go about writing, and how did that all transpire?
Well, all 3 of the books, there's no outlining. It was just totally sit down and create as I go, and which was challenging, of course, but also I just like that because you don't know where you're going to end up. You start somewhere and I get surprised where the story may turn, and just follow it that way, right? And I guess, you could say that I'm a quick writer, but I usually, my thing is if I can get 2,000 words in a day, and then that's it. It might take me 3 hours, it might take me 6,
Right. So do you have a goal that you want, like, are you like a binge writer? Do you sit down and just hammer it out, or do you have a plan as to how you're going to approach it? How does that all work?
Well, for each story, I mean, I'll just start with a character I have in mind, and that character's in a situation, you know, and then from there, there's some sort of causality that moves the story forward, and you introduce characters along the way. But if I hit my sort of word count goal on it, I won't, like, unless I feel the need to continue the story forward, I'll stop right at around 2,000 and just call it a day.
Right.
And I just continue that until the story is, I feel, long enough to justify, you know.
Well, I have to assume that you write early in the morning so you can ski in the afternoon.
Yeah, yes, that's very true.
So, you know, the theme of your book has a lot to do with resorts and skiing,
Yeah.
and so forth, as you mentioned, Colorado. But you also tie in with the Columbia Valley and, you know, locales around the Kootenays as well. Makes it a really interesting sense of place to the book as well.
Well, traveling has just always been a passion of mine, and when I go places, I feel inspired to write about them in some way. And now, having said that, the one novel that I'm already thinking about next is going to be set in Columbia Valley, so that'll be a fun experience for me to write in a location that I know like the back of my hand, you know.
Sure. You know, we touched on it already a little bit, but where do you find your inspiration? Where do your ideas come from, do you feel?
It's hard to pin down exactly where they come from, but it can be from, I mean, sometimes it's the music I listen to, sometimes it's just my own experiences, sometimes it's a certain writer that I'm reading, you know, and I'm drawing from the sort of structure that they use and that kind of thing.
Okay. So when it comes to your books, you know, I just observed just reading through them that you know, it's almost documentary in some style, in that, you know, it's very current, and you're documenting a lot of events that are happening and so forth. Does that sort of lead back to or connect with your journalism training?
Yeah, so and something that I actually forgot to mention there is that I do take, like, if there's something that's happening in the papers that I find interesting, I like the idea of taking that and saying, well, where does this story continue? And it's fun making stuff up like that, you know.
Right.
I like the Carl Hiaasen. He's one of my favorite writers, and he sort of does that, as far as I know, a lot with his work, is that something's going on that you would think is fiction in Florida, and you're reading this in the paper, and he said, I can make a novel out of this, you know.
Right.
So.
Well, they say that real life is often better than fiction, so there's lots of ground there to be covered. So let's just talk a little bit about your formal training and so forth. I know you've taken time to you know, do seminars and workshops and that kind of thing, including at Banff, and now you're working on at film school, I believe you told me. Just sort of elaborate on some of that background and some of that training that you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to journalism school. I was a Bachelor of Commerce graduate, and what got me into writing and everything like that was love for reading, and reading authors like Michael Lewis and Tom Wolfe, the sort of narrative nonfiction. And when I graduated, I was writing a little bit for the University of Calgary's student newspaper, but after I graduated, that's when I just sort of thought this is something that I could see myself doing, and in that respect, I'm sort of self-taught, having not gone to a journalism school. But I have done the first sort of workshop or residency that I did was at the Banff Center for Literary Arts, and it was an environmental reportage, and we had to bring a piece to get juried in, and that was my first experience where it was like a month-long sort of intensive thing that was overseen by experienced journalists. And then from there I did one workshop with Keith Liggett at the St. Eugene, and that's it. And now I'm doing this year-long screenwriting program at the Vancouver Film School. So I'm about a quarter of the way through that, and this is the closest thing to formal training, absolutely, in any of the writing that I've done.
Nothing like training, writing to train yourself, right?
Yeah.
The practice is essential. That you.
Yeah, I think like it's something where with what I've really appreciated is that up to now the 3 books that I've written were just completely improvised. But in this screenwriting program, they're getting us to do outlines and things like that. So it's not something that I would naturally do on my own, but being forced to do it through assignments and everything, it's really helped me see writing and coming about storytelling in a fresh way. So it's been great.
And we're not going to talk a lot about the production of the books or anything like that, but I have to commend you on the way the books look, and they have an appeal to them.
Thanks.
And I would say that it's more than a book that's thrown together. It's been designed very, very nicely. Do you have a vision as to how you want it to look when you finished writing it?
In terms of the cover art? Or?
Yeah, well, the whole. I mean, I like the typeface in the book. It seems like it just flows really nicely.
Yeah, no, yeah, I work with people that help me, like the covers. Sarah Bennett did them, and she's based in Invermere. And I mean, I brought ideas to her and sort of themes I wanted in the images and everything, but she's the one who put it together. And then in the inside, I know the formatter who's just a whiz at doing that kind of thing, and he helps me with that. And together we create these books.
Yeah, good for you. It's like I said, they read well and they also present themselves well too. So I just wanted to wrap up here. What's the reaction been to your 3 books?
Well, Run for Rose is the one that's the most recently published, and when people read that, first of all, I've had great responses from the people that have read it, and they also say that it's a book that makes them want to go travel again. It really, we've all been locked down and sort of homebound for over a year now. When they read the book, they're just like, I really want to get out and do and see and explore, and that's been really gratifying to hear.
Yeah. Just before we finish here, I want to ask about the future. So 3 books in 1 year. What's the next few years look like?
Yeah, well, I'll finish the screenwriting program in December, and then from there, in terms of my writing, I already have another novel that I'm thinking about, and I'll get going on that as soon as this is finished, and just keep writing. I really believe in the notion of writing every day and making it a habit, and being disciplined about it. So. And
having a bit of time to ski, right?
Yeah, skiing.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I enjoyed reading your books, great novels, and thanks for being a guest on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thanks for having me.
This is Talking Kootenay Books. I'm your host, Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell and I'm the host. We have the opportunity of talking to local authors and writers throughout the Kootenays. Today I'm pleased to have Fraser Sinclair here as our guest today. Welcome, Fraser. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Keith. Thank you.
So, Fraser, tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from Grassmere, which is down by the Montana border. Born and raised here in Cranbrook, raised out there on the family farm.
Okay. So Sinclair is a well-known name in history when it comes to the Kootenays. Can you just tell me a little bit about some of your family history?
Well, my great-great-grandfather was one of the first people to come into this area down through what is now known as Sinclair Pass up by Radium.
Okay.
That was James Sinclair. He brought cattle through the area. He led a party of I believe it was about 20 families that were with him,
right.
And they were headed to settle in what was then known as Oregon country.
Right.
There was no international border at that time.
Right. Yeah, interesting overland experience back in the day. So I wanted to just explore the two new books that you've put out. First of all, the first one was Sawtooth, and then the second was a sequel to that, The Lone Dark Figure. How close together were these books put out?
They were pretty close. I published Sawtooth in March of 2019, and I published The Lone Dark Figure in January of this year.
Okay, so 2 books in 1 year, that's a pretty big accomplishment. Congratulations. Tell me, how would you describe the books?
Well, the books are, the original one, Sawtooth, it starts out with it's 2 couples that take on a winter lodge caretaking job high up in the BC mountains.
Right.
And it goes from there. It's all their adventures and misfortunes and dealing with the eccentric owner of the lodge.
Right.
And then that book, the Sawtooth book, was actually, I didn't know at that point if I could put out a story.
Right.
So I just started writing, and it just compounded and it just went. By the time I finished Sawtooth, I knew exactly what the sequel was going to be about.
So you were sort of writing the second book as you were working on the first?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so I read through both books. I found them quite colorful, full of adventure, full of sort of suspense and that kind of thing. What prompted you to actually sit down and write the books?
Well, the story, the original Sawtooth story, I've had in my mind for probably 10 years, roughly what I wanted to write about.
Right.
And my wife and I, we managed a lodge, the Elkview Lodge in Fernie. We did that for 2 years. And when we got that job, and there we were actually living part of my book. We're managing this lodge. It's high up in the mountains. It's snow up to the yin-yang. I mean, there was all kinds of snow up there. And we had to deal with all this, these people coming in, checking out. So all of a sudden, I thought, you know, the story's coming together.
Right.
I
So
can write the book.
you could take a lot of those personal experiences and sort of incorporate it into a novel? Is that really what happened?
And that's basically what I did. And actually, I think I did it a little more in the second book.
Okay.
I put a lot more of maybe my own personal experiences with things added to them into the second book.
So your father was Roy Sinclair, is that correct?
That's correct.
So he was also a writer.
Yeah.
Did that inspire you in any way?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I loved my dad's books, and I thought, you know, I wonder if I can do this. So that's kind of where it came from.
Right. So let's talk about the publishing process. How did you go about actually taking, you know, the task of writing it down and then producing a book? How did that all go together?
Well, I ended up talking to my sister up in the Yukon, and she had a friend there that self-publishes. And so I got a hold of her and talked to her for a bit about it, and it ended up being she self-published through a company in Edmonton. So I used that company and put the first book out, got a hold of them for the second book, and away it went.
Right. So why will people enjoy your book?
Well, I think especially people that know me, they will realize that a lot of it is maybe a little bit about me, but yet they might be in it too.
Right.
There might be a little bit of them in it as well.
Right. So there's a lot of Kootenay connections in the book and so forth. So that comes out quite strongly throughout the book. So when you actually went to the printer, and did they do all the design and actually putting the book together and the editing and that kind of thing?
No, the editing I had, my older sister did the original edit on both books. And then I did my covers. The cover of Sawtooth is my own picture.
Okay.
I took that right off my deck in Grassmere, looking into Sand Creek behind Elko.
Right.
And then the second cover, I did all the designing on that myself. And once I had the lone dark figure that was going to be a pretty main character, I wanted to go with that for a cover.
Sure. When you actually put the book together and so forth, any mentors or any inspiration as to how you came about the characters, developed the story, that kind of thing?
I suppose my mentor would be my father.
Yeah.
You know, just going back to that.
So our viewers may not be familiar with what your father wrote. Could you just tell us a little bit about his books?
Yeah, he wrote 3 books. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me because I know the names of 2 of them, Paper Trees and Whiskey 6.
Right.
And I can't recall the name of the
So just give me an
third
idea what the books were about.
one. Well, they were back in the olden days, very early days. The one is based down in the Grassmere area,
Right.
and it was probably in the 20s, 30s. And then one of the other books is more up in the McBride, Penny, BC area,
Okay.
and which he lived there too.
Right. A lot of logging history and that
A lot
kind
of
of
logging history, yeah.
Right. Okay. So when you actually have the book in your hand, have you been out promoting it, getting some reaction from readers, that kind of thing?
I have. I do a lot of social media promoting, Facebook, Instagram, and I do have them here at Huckleberry Books in Cranbrook.
Oh, okay.
And any feedback I'm getting has been really good.
Yeah.
People are really enjoying the story.
Right.
In fact, I had an old timer out in the Elko area tell me the only thing wrong with my books is there wasn't enough of them.
So you'd like to keep on reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants me to do more.
So which takes me to the next question. What is the plan for the future, Fraser?
Well, I am going to write more. I wouldn't mind doing one more in this series and then go in a different direction.
Right.
I've actually had I worked at the Ministry of Highways in Jaffrey for 22 years, and I've actually had some of my old co-workers ask me to do a book on that.
Oh, okay.
And then I had another old timer at Elko ask me if I would do a book on some of the old sawmills in the area,
Right.
and I do find that quite interesting.
So those would be historical.
Yeah, those would be more along a historical line.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that something that you're interested in, the local history of the area?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think your own family's got a pretty interesting story.
Well,
Have
it
you ever
does.
thought about writing about your family?
Yes, and my brother is, he's bugging me to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that might be a possibility down the road.
Could be a possibility down the road. The way it's looking, I'm going to be awful busy writing all these stories that everybody else wants.
So just before we wrap up here, just tell me how you go about writing. How often do you write? What's the process?
Well, I use a writing app. I probably spend, I'll write from September right through till January, February, and I probably spend maybe 2 to 3 hours per day on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every day or whenever you sort of...
Not
get in-
every day. Yes, you get on pretty good runs where you do go every day. Once Christmas hits, I find I just take a break. I shut down for a while. Maybe get back at it in the new year. Whatnot like that. My wife has been very supportive. She's always encouraging me on because she wants to read the next chapter.
Right. So I noticed in the books that there's a connection to Arizona. What's the connection there?
That is, the connection to Arizona is my wife. She's from Phoenix.
Okay.
And we spent some time down there. I spent a lot of time in the area that I do mention in there, Congress and that country. It's a very good, a lot of gold in that country.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you do some gold prospecting, right?
Yep. Yeah, I do some of my own. I have a hobby claim
Yeah.
just out of Cranbrook here.
Good. Well, congratulations again on the book. So the 2 books, Sawtooth and The Lone Dark Figure, Fraser Sinclair, an interesting read, and thanks for sharing with our viewers. I think people would enjoy reading your adventure stories.
Well, thank you, Keith.
Good. My name is Keith Powell, and this has been Talking Kootenay Books.